Get ready to uncover truths and reality of today's politics. Here's your host, Lori Mills.
Hi, welcome to Uncover California. I'm Lori Mills. You guys might have tuned in a few weeks ago where we did a show on conservatorship abuse. As you know, this is the only show I've ever done that I was threatened not to do it. Well, you threatened me. We're going to do another show on it. Our first guest is Ena Farley. His mother's video went viral a few years back, and his mother was kidnapped by the police, and she was thrown into conservatorship even though Jonathan was there to take care of her. It's a heartbreaking story, and it deserves to be heard again, and we can get an update on what happened following that tragic video. Our second guest is Carole Herman, and she's got an organization to help the families of people that are facing this conservatorship abuse. It is called Foundation Aiding the Elderly. And I want you guys to stay tuned again. These are important topics. My advice, I'm not an attorney, I'm a talk show host, so all I can do is present these stories to you. If you're an attorney out there and you want to help these families, contact Uncover Cali at uncovercali.com, and we'll pass your information along to our guests. Everybody, stay tuned. Who's ready to have some fun? You guys, you can now charter the Scarlet Belle paddle wheel riverboat. You guys, the boat holds 150 guests. If you're planning on getting married, you can host a wedding here. If you just want to have a good party, they'll do that too. The boat holds up to 150 guests with all-inclusive packages available. There also is a midweek group discount if you're interested. They have a fully stocked bar, full-service catering, and they'll help you with event planning and theme ideas. I can tell you we did a Trumptilla on this boat, and we're going to do it again. They also have another vessel that you can throw casino night parties on. There is nothing better than the Scarlet Belle in the Channel Islands Harbor. Use promo code CALI and get a great deal on your next event. Welcome back, everybody. Right now, I'm going to play a video for you. This is Ena Farley's mother, and this is what happened to his family. And understand, he was there, he was caring for her, and they took her anyway.
No.
You can say no. He can say no.
No,
I can say no.
No, you can't take me.
But
can't take
at
me.
the end of the day, you are going to be going to the hospital.
Well, you can't force me to do that.
We can force you.
I got this.
Because I'm black. It's because you're breaking my arm. You're breaking my arm. I don't want to go. You're breaking my arm.
Yep.
You're breaking my arm. I don't want.
Relax.
I'm not.
Take a breath.
I don't need a hospital.
Take a big.
Jonathan, welcome to Uncover California. Your video is shocking, and I want you to walk us through the story of what happened to your mother and tell us about your mother. Who was your mom?
My mother was an historian. She taught at a local college, as did my father. And on or after January 19, 2023, a woman named Mary Ho, H-O, was put in my mother's house in the small village of Brockport, New York. And it was my brother, Christopher John Farley, who put Mary Ho in my mother's house. Now, my mother didn't want this woman here. On January 22nd, 2023, a church friend of my mother's tried to visit my mother, and Mary Ho wouldn't let her. She wouldn't let a church friend of my own mother pray with her. And Mary Ho said she's not on the list, meaning the friend was not on the list. And when I heard this, I was thinking, what list? My brother Chris had created a list, and only the people on this list could even see my mother? That doesn't make any sense. My brother Chris lives 350 miles away. Before the pandemic, he visited here maybe once a year. He doesn't know who my mother knows. This is
And
crazy.
and you were living with your mother at the time, or where were you during all of this?
Yes. So this was my home. However, I have a job in another city. And so while this was the place I considered home and it's where I came to during all the vacations, I teach at a university. Um, I would go during the semesters, of course, to the place where I work. However, during the pandemic, which had only ended for us a few months before, for 2.5 years, I was right here in this home. I'm actually in the home now, isolating with my mother. So for 2.5 years, I was here, and then I went back to the city where my university is for a semester, coming back home every 2 or 3 weekends. I was here for the entire Christmas vacation in 2022 until about January 18, 2023. And then it seems the next day, my brother Chris had put this woman, Mary Ho, in my mother's house. So my mother is calling me and she tells me that she has never felt as stepped on. She has never felt as frightened in her life. And she tells me that Mary Ho is treating her like an idiot dog. Those are my mother's words. And she calls me again the next day. And so on January 27, 2023, I decide to come back to the village of Brockport, where my mother's home is, to see what's going on. So I'd been with my mother for the previous 4.5 for 4.5 of the previous 6 weeks. I was gone for about 9 days, and then I came back, and what I saw was even worse than what I had been told by my mother's church friend. Mary Ho had taken over about half of my mother's house. In the garage, there was no car. There were 50 boxes, 50 boxes belonging to Mary Ho. She had taken over about half of the rooms in our house. She had paintings that were literally about 4 feet by 4 feet. She had put her own artwork up on the wall. She had removed our artwork. And my mother had been moved from the bedroom where she had been sleeping for at least the previous decade. My father had passed away in 2010, to another room. And even in that other room where my mother had been put, Mary Ho had more of Mary Ho's belongings. She had 2 gigantic suitcases, each one of which was bigger than any suitcase I had ever attempted to lift in my entire life. And my mother's belongings were strewn on the floor in disarray. My mother hated disarray.
Wow. So you come home to all of this. How did Mary Ho treat you?
I barely interacted with her, but my brother Chris came with his 20-year-old son, Dylan, and they were trying to stop me from helping my mother. But I noticed that Mary Ho was drugging my mother. I don't have to say alleged. She was giving my mother melatonin, which most people think of as an innocuous sleep drug.
Right.
But it wasn't one of the drugs that my mother took. My mother took drugs for high blood pressure, for diabetes. She took vitamin C, cranberry, that sort of thing. And I said to my mother, you don't have to take that. And my mother didn't want to take it. And then 2 hours later, Mary Ho tried to give my mother melatonin again. Mary Ho was not a nurse or anything like that. She had no professional background in home health care. My brother Chris, strangely enough, for some reason claimed he knew Mary Ho, that she was a friend of his. But when I said, you're not a friend of hers, his son, Dylan, started cursing at me strangely, almost like it was a script. And at one point, my mother tried to put her hand on Dylan Farley's mouth. Dylan is my brother's son. And he turned to her and said, don't touch me, as if he was going to beat her. This is a 20-year-old man who is about 6'5" and maybe 220 pounds. He told his 84-year-old grandmother, don't touch me, as if he was going to beat her if she didn't comply, but she did comply. But he said something quite interesting, which I didn't realize the import of until days, if not weeks later. I said, how dare you speak like that to me in my own house? And he said, it's not your house, it's her house. So he had made a distinction that my mother and I had never made in our entire lives, the distinction between the house being hers and the house being mine.
Well, or the family house. That's so sad to me. Now, tell me about your mom, like her mental capacity at her age. And was she able to care for herself without in home health care?
Yes, she actually was. And so I actually would not say that I was taking care of her when I was living with her. If anything, she was taking care of me. But in our home, she paid all of her bills. After the violent kidnapping, her finances actually were raided, were completely looted. So she actually took better care financially of herself than Chris Farley, my brother, took care of her finances. I mean, he took care of her finances in another sense. So she would always pay all the bills. The only issue she had was a memory problem. In 2015, she had fallen and hit her head. And after that point, she could remember things that happened before 2015 when she hit her head. And she could remember things that happened after 2015 if they happened less than 2 weeks before. So her memory for things that happened after 2015 would last only 2 weeks, which is not good, obviously.
Right, right.
But
So tell me about the day you were at the house and what happened.
yes, so my mother was actually taken twice and kidnapped twice. So on January 28, 2023, this is one day after I came back to the house, Mary Ho, my brother, and his son Dylan left. Now, Mary Ho's belongings were still in the house, and that was very fateful. But she was gone, my brother was gone, and he took his son with him. So the day after that, a Sunday, December 29, 2023, my mother and I go to the local sheriff's office and we report all of this. Sergeant Toomey tells us this isn't really a police matter, but she made a report anyway.
Right.
The county we live in now tells us they cannot find that report. 2 days later, police come to our house. I come down, I'm upstairs. I come down and see, by my estimate, 7 to 10 police. They later told me there are only 4 police, but you can watch the video at the website enafarleyjan31.com. Now, there's no overt violence. This isn't the video that your viewers have just seen, but my mother is doing something I've never seen her do in my entire life. She's shouting at the top of her lungs. She's saying, telling everyone to leave her house, everyone but me, of course, and she is saying that she has to talk to her attorney. She doesn't know why the police were there. I thought I knew why the police were there, because who was there? The police with Mary Ho, with my brother Chris Farley, and with my brother Anthony Farley, who, by my count, had visited my mother only 3 times in 5 years, had only seen my mother 3 times in 5 years.
Now let's play the devil's advocate really quick. What would be their argument of why they did what they did?
That would be a great question. I've been trying to get the answer for 2 years and now 3 months with no answers except the following. At the time, I thought they were there to force us to have Mary Ho remain in our house because I didn't know what the rules were about residency in New York State. I now know that since she had only been there for 8 or 9 days, and since this was less than 12 days after she had moved in, 12 days or less, she was not a resident of our house. My mother had every right to kick her out, which my mother did. She called her up on the phone saying, "Don't come back unless you're coming to pick up your stuff at a pre-scheduled time." But in fact, it turned out they were there for the following reason, which I only found out from a police report, which I got later. So they said in the police report that my brother wanted to put my mother in a nursing home, and I did not want my mother to be put in a nursing home. Now, that's misleading to the point of being false, in that my brothers had never, individually or collectively, ever discussed with me putting my mother in a nursing home. So they just came. It was just a sudden blitzkrieg. And also, I don't even know why that's a police matter. That's a family matter.
Right.
And even if it were a police matter, why, by my count, 7 to 10 police? That's what you send if there's a school shooter or Al-Qaeda.
Or you're a J6 defendant. I hate to say that, but that's true. You
Yes.
know, I suffered with my parents, elderly. My dad had extreme dementia with outrage. My sister moved out there to take care of them, and it did become too much for her. So, you know, we brought it in healthcare, and my dad just hated them. Nobody could come in his house, but they didn't move in. That's the thing that's kind of weird to me. That like I can see the in-home healthcare. Maybe they get a room, or maybe they come in and they check in once a day, make sure your parents are eating. But it just seems pretty extreme to go from your mom's functioning at home to we're going to throw her into a nursing care facility. Is this something that you, as her son, was willing to do for her if you could not be there to care for her? Like, pick out a nice place for her to be, have her approval on going there? You know, because I can understand my parents didn't want to leave home either. My mom stayed there, my dad couldn't. And it was a horrible time in our lives, but we made sure he went somewhere safe.
Well, this is why my brother succeeded in his criminal plan, because everyone believes, and this is what I hope your listeners will be able to take away from this, so we can end the scourge of guardianships in this country and in other countries. Everyone believes that no one would take an extreme measure like this unless there was a good reason for it. He
Right.
didn't
That's what
have
I'm saying.
he had an evil reason, perhaps, but there was no good reason. They just made assumptions, probably, but didn't check up to see is that valid. For example, let's use logic. Christopher Farley claimed that Mary Ho was a home health care aide. So why, after only 12 days or less, would he be moving my mother to a memory care facility, which is what he did on that day or a few days after this? That
What
doesn't
was
make
his
any.
what was his relationship with Mary Ho? Just curious. It seems a little convoluted to me, and I don't know, but did they know each other before? Did they have any sort of relationship? Was this to take over your mom's house and you wouldn't have a say in it? Is there any
Yes,
insight there?
yes, it's very strange. My brother Chris had brought Mary Ho over to our house in December 2022 for about 15 minutes. And I thought that was very strange because I actually had met Mary Ho once about 10 years before. Mary
How?
Ho had dated my other brother, Felipe Farley.
So
However,
Mary Ho dated your brother?
Felipe, but this is Christopher. And so
Okay.
I thought, how does Chris know her? That's strange. But I didn't think anything of it because I had no idea that a nefarious plan was underfoot. But in the police body camera footage, which your viewers can watch at enafarleyjan31.com for January 31, 2023, she is talking to police and she's telling the police that she's taking my mother's house, that she and the police are fully aware that my mother, that's something that we were unaware of, my mother and I, but she and the police are fully aware that my mother's being permanently removed from the house that day, that I am going to be then evicted from the house. I don't know by whom, because my mother was the sole owner of the house and she and I were the sole legal residents. And then she, Mary Ho, was going to be taking the house. So this was a criminal conspiracy. I don't mean metaphorically, literally. My mother was the sole owner of the house. Even if someone else owned the house, she could not be removed from the house summarily like that. It would have been an illegal eviction, but this was even more bizarre because she was the owner being removed by non-owners and non-residents with no legal authority to take her or kick her out of her own house. I, much later, after my mother's death, got her Chase bank account records, some of them, and they show a January 26, 2023 transfer to my mother's bank account of $145,815.49. What's the import of that? Well, my brother Chris had said, and the county said, that my mother's house was worth $145,900. So about the same amount, within $85. So it stands to reason that these two figures both constituted the price of the house, and that I hypothesize, I allege that my brother Chris had sold the house to Mary Ho, and that my mother and I were both just going to be kicked out of it, and the house given solely to Mary Ho. That is that's what needs to be investigated by police. But here's the rub. How do you get police to investigate something when they themselves were co-conspirators in the crime?
Well,
On
and
the
see,
January
that's the
31st,
thing that's so shocking to me. There would definitely be, if he sold her the home, there would definitely be a record of that somewhere.
well,
Did
this was
she
all
have,
illegal. He didn't have the right to sell the house. Everything was illegal. My mother was the sole owner. My parents
right?
were the only people whose names were on the deed for the house. And he told police that he had power of attorney, and maybe he did. I do not know. However, power of attorney, as an attorney told me, does not give you the right to decide who is in the house. Only the person whose name is in the deed gets to decide who is in the house. And moreover, my brother claimed he was healthcare proxy. Maybe that's true. I do not know. However, I looked at the form that my brother claimed was the document for healthcare proxy, and it says clearly that he only has powers under three conditions and three conditions only. If my mother is terminally ill, number one, if my mother is permanently unconscious, number two, and number three, if she has a permanent brain injury and will never again regain the ability to express her wishes. Well, she said she gave her wishes. She said she needs to talk to her attorney. She was never allowed to talk to an attorney of her choice. She told everyone to leave the house. At that point, when they refused, they were guilty of criminal trespass. And in the video, my mother is telling them she does not wish to leave her property. Well, they took her and they didn't return her.
And you were there as her son saying, "What are you doing to my mom?" Again, I can see if there was no one there to care for her and she was down and out and couldn't function on her own. I could see a court ordering, well, let's get someone to check in on her once a day. I know my dad's condition was so bad he couldn't take care of himself at all. There's no way. But again, my sister moved out there. So I'm just trying to figure out why they would take her. So they take her and she ends up in a nursing home.
Yes, but to this day, we do not know where she went when she left the house on January 31st, 2023.
What do you
This,
mean?
what I mean is literally that. After half an hour, my mother was gone. And even though in the video it sounds like I know that they're taking my mother, I actually did not know. A policewoman told me that my brothers had just taken her out to dinner or for a drive. But when my mother did not return by midnight, I knew that she'd been kidnapped. So I waited 2 days to report her missing. I called up what turned out to be the exact same policewoman who said that she was not even going to allow me to report a crime. And I've not been allowed to do so to this day, 2 years and 3 months later, because my mother was not missing. My mother had not been kidnapped, the policewoman told me. Well, they wouldn't tell me where she was either. So the next day, February 3rd, 2023.
As her family member, you have every right to see your mother, unless you're
Well,
abusive to her and they can prove that.
nothing like that was ever the case, and they did not let me see my mother. I did not see her again for 8 months after that, and only for 45 minutes. But I'll tell you about that in a second. It wasn't just me who was prevented from seeing my mother. It was everyone on Earth except for a small list of people. But let me say that at that point, I spoke with a police sergeant named Anthony Mazenga, and he would not tell me where my mother was. He would not tell me why he was not going to tell me where my mother was. And when I had called Adult Protective Services, they told me my mother was safe, but we now know my mother was not safe. She was in peril. And we don't know where she was.
What was
Where,
their reasoning for telling you couldn't see your mother?
oh, as I just said, they did not tell me why I could not see my mother. And and to this day, nothing like that has been stated. From January 31st to February 4, we don't know where my mother was. She was put in the facility on February 4 days later. We now know. But the question is, how did they keep her from calling the house, from calling my cell phone? She knew my cell phone number. If they put her in a hotel, as was indicated in one document, in our village, it's a small village, she could walk further than I could walk. So how did they stop her from walking home? I contend that they must have physically tied her up. They must have muzzled her so she couldn't shout. Maybe they had a policeman at the door All of this is a crime called false imprisonment. But on February 5, 2023, my mother, I knew, was supposed to meet a family friend to attend a concert in our village. I just guessed and I hoped that maybe my brother would be afraid to break that appointment because it might ring alarm bells. And sure enough, I went to the concert and my mother was there with Mary Ho and with the friend. And I went up to my mother. And at this point, I should also point out that in 2017,
So
years
Mary
after,
Ho followed your mom where your mom went?
Mary Ho may have taken her from the facility to this place. I do not know. But Mary Ho was there. And I should say that in 2017, my mother's memory did decline precipitously after she visited my brother Chris for about 2 weeks, to the point where she had trouble remembering what happened the day before. But she could remember what happened that day. Maybe by nighttime, she might forget what happened in the morning. And she could reason, make decisions. We could converse even about complex topics like the news, which she watched every day, or my personal life. And it remained constant till 2023, 6 years later, until Mary Ho moved in. But at this point, February 5, 2023, I go to my mother and say, this woman, Mary Ho, helped kidnap you 5 days before. And my mother immediately says, let's go. She tells Mary Ho to step aside. Mary Ho refuses to move. Mary Ho instead calls 911. So imagine this tremendous irony that the woman who was trying to steal my mother's house gets to call police, but I was never able to get police to rescue my mother from her false imprisonment. Well, my mother just barrels past Mary Ho, and then I suggest to my mother, what do you want to do, drive around or go back home? And my mother says, let's go back home. And then 15 minutes later, the police arrive at our house. And you can see these videos at enafarleytaken.com. They speak with my mother for 2 hours. My mother is there saying she's happy now. She didn't know who those other people were, but she is happy. She wants to be under the care and guidance of her son, referring to me. And at that point, my brother Felipe, who was an attorney, says that
Mary Ho's old boyfriend.
yes, but he says that at that point, any power of attorney or healthcare proxy that Chris Farley might claim could be viewed as having been revoked, because my mother is saying she is there, she's happy there. Later on, police say, well, you have to pay attention to what Chris wants, and Chris wants you to return to this facility, which my mother had been put in only the day before, 1 day before. And my mother says, no, I make decisions about what I do. And she will make them under advisement. She will consult with her doctor. She will consult with her older sister, who used to work in the pharmaceutical industry, obviously retired, but would have younger colleagues. My mother says all of this to police repeatedly, over and over again, and it's not sinking in. She's not understanding why it's not sinking in. I'm not understanding why it's not sinking in. But of course, we now know the reason is they were determined to take her no matter what. All illegal, because they had no legal authority. So I want to make this clear to your audience.
Did a judge give them conservatorship over your mother?
That's exactly the point. There was no judge. There was no court. There was no court order. There was no warrant. There was no sheet of paper giving any legal authority to these police or even to my brother to take my mother. There was no guardianship case, which is what we call it here in New York State. There was no guardian. There was no temporary guardian. There was no guardianship court case. It was simply a kidnapping with no hyperbole. Like maybe the legal definition is slightly different, but it was a violent kidnapping of my mother, a free person, at that point.
Okay, so Jonathan, we're starting to get low on time, so I want to get to what happened. So they took your mom, and tell me about the decline in your mom from the time that they took her again. Were you able to visit her? And you had sent a couple photos. I want Eric to throw them up. One of which is your mother, beautiful woman, obviously a very educated woman. And then what she ended up like. And as you guys can see, she's bruised. Looks like she's been beaten. That's not care. So
Correct.
What happened, Jonathan? And try to do this in about 5 minutes if you can. get us through the rest of this story.
Yeah, so this is the video that your viewers saw on February 5, 2023. They dragged my mother out of the house after 2 hours speaking with her. She's screaming, "You're breaking my arm." She's saying, "Leave me in my house." They tie her up in a way that's illegal to do for people in nursing homes in New York State. And they claim it was because she needed to take her high blood pressure pills, which they claim were not in the house. They were in the house. And then that excuse that the police gave never found its way into any document again. So the following week, 2 weeks after the first kidnapping, a week after the second kidnapping, my brother Chris starts a guardianship case. That's the first time a court enters into the picture. And that the judge in that case, Judge Christopher Ciaccio, says, "I can't see my mother, can't have anything to do with her, no reason given." But my brother is still not a temporary guardian. So my mother is being held illegally. I hope your libertarian viewers are outraged that my mother is being held against her will. We now know from documents from the facility that my mother is, at this point, demanding that they let her go, that they call police, that she is saying she's their prisoner. This is all in their documentation, that she is their prisoner, that she's never been treated this badly the whole time she's lived in the United States. My mother was a U.S. citizen, but she was originally from Jamaica. And they also drug her with drugs to curb her aggression. Now, if you watch the video, you can see my mother is perfectly calm for 2 hours until they drag her out. But they call it that, and they gave her a drug, Seroquel, which is for schizophrenics, which my mother was not. No one in our family had ever been diagnosed with schizophrenia, but it's used to, I guess, just, incapacitate the person. But my mother still had not been declared mentally incapacitated.
Wow.
This Seroquel, though, does increase the likelihood of death, according to the FDA, and it does increase confusion. But we have very little information, because when family friends tried to visit, like my friend Tony Harkin and his mother Nancy Harkin, who was 78 years old, they were not allowed to see my mother. And my friend Tony Harkin said, "What is this? Is she in prison?" We learned later from subpoena documents that at least by July, 5 months after the kidnapping, there was a list of only 17 people, and only those 17 people were allowed to see or even talk to my mother. That list excluded my brother Felipe, it excluded me, it excluded my mother's younger sister. Of course, it excluded the Harkin family friends for half a decade. No explanation.
Wow.
Unfortunately, one person was on the list that I spoke to, my mother's church friend, and she was able to make videos of my mother, which you can see some of which on the YouTube channel Free Ena Farley. And you can see that while my mother looks and sounds terrible, she looks as if she has aged years in just months, but she sounds of sound mind, and she's making a reasonable conversation, and everyone can hear that now thanks to the church friends videos. She was later prevented from seeing my mother also. My brother took her off the list, also, the church friend.
So how long from time being taken into custody and put into a controlled environment did it take for your mother to pass away? And then what happened to all of her assets?
Well, I should say at one point, she said she was beaten by the employees of the facility, which is called Cranberry Landing. And that's where you can see her with blood in her eye and 2 gigantic bruises on both sides of her face. And in the video, she complains about pain in her chin. Mysteriously, YouTube removed this, first deleted all the videos on the YouTube channel Free Ena Farley. And then when they were re-uploaded, it changed the sound on that one video. No explanation for who has the power to do that. But she'd never been injured like that in her entire life at this facility where she was supposed to be safe. My father's cousin, Jane Farley, who was threatened with arrest if she tried to see my mother, but my father's cousin, Jane Farley, became my attorney and then was able to free my mother from my brother's direct control 10 months after her kidnapping. But my mother was still under my brother's control for a year. And even then, she was given a guardian, so she was no longer free, but she just wasn't under the direct control of my brother, Chris Farley. And then he kept us in court every month trying to become guardian. But my mother passed away 18 months after the kidnapping, and her assets were, she was then in debt, according to Chris Farley. But we have never been able to see clear copies of all the finances. My brother refuses to hand over that information, and the judge even fined me $13,000 when one of my attorneys tried to get access to my mother's Chase Bank records, which I later got after my mother passed away. And my brother got the judge rather, to force my mother to never return to her own home. So there are court orders by the judge saying my mother could not return to her own home. And a medical doctor named Lisa Farley said my mother can live with her. Lisa Farley, a medical doctor, wanted my mother to live with her. And then the judge said, no, my mother cannot live with Lisa Farley, a medical doctor. She has to live in a facility. And so my mother died in a facility, not in her home.
With her family.
With her family. And now my brother Chris is trying to take this house. Technically, the same judge has given my brother control of this house, and he's trying to evict me from the house. I mentioned that not to elicit tears from your audience over my plight. I say it only because this is the final proof that my brother was interested in my mother's assets, because my mother said on video before she had been declared mentally incompetent by the judge that she wanted me to have the house. So my brother knows this, and yet he's trying to take the house, and so it's clear. My mother should have had $1 million or more. We don't know how much, and now they're saying her estate is in debt. Only 18 months later, where did the money go? That's the question I've been asking. And when I told that to the judge, he threatened me again with more sanctions.
Well, let's hopefully, our next guest, I can get you guys connected, and hopefully she can give you some help. I just want to remind everybody, 1 Timothy 5:8. But if anyone does not provide for his relatives, and especially for members of his own household, he's denied the faith and is worse off than an unbeliever. And I believe we really need to care for our parents and the elderly. And it is totally a sin against the Lord to let this continue. So, Jonathan, let everybody know where they can find you. Are you on social media? Let them know again where they can find your YouTube channels, and if there's anything that people can do to help you.
Yes, the YouTube channel is Free Ena Farley. And that's where you'll find 2 videos that have gotten over 1 million views. One of them a short film that won a Telly Award and a W3 Award. And also my personal website is latticetheory.net. If you approximate the spelling, you're going to find it. And it might say, do you really want to go to this website? But that's where you can try to send me email. But I encourage everyone to just spread the word. This is a known strategy by people. There are 3 steps. First is to isolate the victim. Second is to defame all protectors. And then third is to loot the estate. And my brother Christopher did all 3. It wasn't just me kept away from my mother, as I said. It was everyone except for a small list of 17, including family friends of over half a century, including multiple people with the same last name, such as Jane Farley, Felipe Farley, and of course me, Jonathan Farley.
And we need to care for our elderly folks. Jonathan, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate hearing your story. Okay, everybody, stay tuned. Our next guest, as I said, will be Carole Herman. She has the foundation Aiding the Elderly. And again, hopefully I can get her and Jonathan connected. Thanks so much. Stay tuned, everyone.
Welcome to the MAGA Mall. We have the largest selection of the finest quality MAGA caps and Trump caps that are made. We have over 250 hats and 1,000 different products in 28 product categories. And you can buy any of our products by going to our website. It's at themagamall.com, and use promo code CALI. And remember, it's always a MAGA day at the MAGA Mall.
Welcome back, everybody. This is Lori, and our next guest is with the Foundation of Aiding the Elderly. Carole Herman, welcome to Uncover California.
Thank you, Lori. Thank you for having me.
So you've been doing this for decades. tell everybody your story. And before you do, we're going to play a little clip that you did in the 80s on this with Geraldo Rivera.
What do you think of Charlie?
Well, I give Charlie a lot of credit. Charlie has not been a well man. He's had a pacemaker. He has been very dedicated to this cause. I got very involved with Charlie. When Charlie first got involved, especially in the Isabel Miller case, he was discredited by the members, people that from the nursing home, from the town that he lives in. Charlie contacted me because of the foundation that I had.
Let me say that you are the chairman and founder of FATE, F-A-T-E, that is the foundation aiding the elderly.
Okay, so, Carole, Eric just played that video from 1986. You have been dealing with this for decades. Tell us what's going on.
Well, you know, when I did that story for Geraldo show, I was basically then focusing on nursing home abuse because I had a family member who was abused in 1982 and died in a facility, and I started investigating nursing home abuse. Not realizing that Isabel Miller was a conservatee and how I was going to get involved in conservatorships. And Isabel Miller, somebody called me about her and said that she was being abused in a nursing home. They heard about the work that I had started in 1982 on abuse in nursing homes when nobody even knew what nursing homes were. So I went up to see her because I was told that she was being mistreated. She wasn't, that she lost all her money. They took, she was really basically abandoned in this nursing home, and she was being drugged and not getting good care. So when I went up there to see her, the administrator of the nursing home refused to let me in because by then
this is a common theme I'm hearing. I'm hearing they're drugged and then I can't see them.
Right.
Even if it's a family member.
Well, there were no family members, but I'm an advocate.
Right.
And I was kind of beginning to be known then, not like I am now, but people knew who I was. And they wouldn't let me in because I had other complaints at that facility that I had filed against them with the state regulators. So then I tried to see the public guardian. She was under public guardianship. And it took me 4 months before they would allow me to even come into their office to meet with them. So then I saw Isabel. And boy, they had her all covered up, long sleeve gown onto where just her fingers showed. I couldn't see her body at all. Obvious to me, she was medicated, over medicated. And she said, and she was also blind on top of that. Help me. I want to get out of here. They're mean to me. Well, man, that meeting lasted maybe 10 or 15 minutes, and man, they got her out of there. She told me they were giving her drugs that made her dizzy. And when I asked her, she had a really pretty Afghan on. I said, where did you get that Afghan? She said, well, I don't know. Somebody put it on me today. So they prepared for me to come in, and they had her looking pretty good and all that. But she died about a week later.
Wow.
And mysteriously, pictures of her body showed up on my doorstep at my house. I found out who did it. It was an inside person. And they got her pictures out of the morgue and sent them to me. It became a real big thing. So that was my first introduction into conservatorship abuse, because I was basically focusing on nursing home abuse, but she just happened to be conserved in a nursing home. So after that, over the years, I have developed 9 banker boxes full of cases all over the country on conservatorship abuse. So back in about 20 years ago, the LA Times did a 3-part series on conservatorship abuse, and the reporter, her name was Robin Fields. She came and practically lived in my office for a week, and she did this big expose exposing conservatorships in California. Then it got really a lot of notice for a while. Then it died off, and because nobody wants to go against the court.
Right. Well, okay. So I want to back you up a little bit here, because we can talk about your TV appearances. Give my audience the big picture of what is happening here. You're dealing with a ton of cases. What is the big picture? Where do all of these things fit together? I want the big picture scenario. kind of the view from overhead. This is what is happening.
What's happening is that the probate department, and I'm going to get really strong on what I'm saying.
Okay.
These probate departments, I'm referring to them now to as the probate mafia. It's a vehicle for the system, whether it's a private conservator or public guardians, to make a lot of money. And they swoop in on these people. And to me, it's a big plan to do this. So even if you have a will and a trust and you think that you have taken care of whatever, finances you have after you pass, you want to make sure that your loved ones get the, your wealth when you die. That's all being overridden by the courts. And the one thing that I must say that people should be aware of, in all my experience, is that I would say the majority of my cases are coming from sibling rivalry.
That's interesting because the last case that we just talked to was a sibling rivalry
What was it?
case.
See, I think that's a big issue, is sibling rivalry.
So
Well,
are you saying that when the siblings start fighting about things, they basically discard the parent and to go after the wealth? What are you saying?
Well, they'll, like, hypothetically, I have a sister, right?
Right.
And my mother dies. And my mother leaves me more money than my sister because I did more for my mother, whatever the reasons for. That sister is not too happy about it. So starts complaining about it, big fight. Next thing you know, they're in front of a judge to get a conservatorship, and they don't get the conservatorship. It's given to a third party. And if there's my experience, if there's money involved, it goes to a private fiduciary. If there's no money involved, it goes to the public guardian. So it just depends on where you are in the hierarchy of wealth, what happens. Lately, though, I've had a couple of cases where the public guardian has taken over guardianship of people that had a lot of money. And that person that had all the money had a will and a trust and said, I want this person to be my POA, power of attorney. And I want this person to take care of, be my successor trustee. But then if there's a lot of money involved, all of a sudden that is totally discarded. And in the one case I'm working on now, in a $47 million estate, went to a public guardian. That's very odd that the public guardian would get a case that big with that much money.
You would think somebody with $47 million would have a huge attorney of their own.
Oh, she had an attorney. They kicked her off.
Who kicked her off? The judge?
The judge in cooperation with a public guardian with 5 other attorneys. They're all making, it's cha-ching, all this money. Every time they go into court, they take all these lawyers in there. There are times that you can have 5 lawyers representing this conservatee, and they're all billable hours. Oh, I think it's the biggest scam, I think, that hit this country. It's more so than nursing home abuse.
Well,
but it's the judge.
And then you look at what is happening to our elderly who we should be caring for. It should be about them. And it's pretty amazing to me to see, stories like Poppy Helgren, who who was on a couple weeks ago, where after her father died, the lawyers were still charging the estate money for 3 years.
Not only that, but Poppy, because she's my client. I don't know if that came out in your show.
That's how I met you.
Oh, that's right. So what Poppy did is she did what most people, when they find out, well, who do I go to complain? So she filed a complaint with the state regulators that monitor residential care homes, those are 6 beds, and they unsubstantiated it. They said, oh, no, they didn't do anything wrong. Well, the death certificate says that her father died from bowel impaction. Well, that's abuse, automatic. So after she contacted me, and of course the state regulators know me pretty well, I refiled that complaint. And it took me a year of dogging the department at a high level with the deputy director, because I like to deal at the top. Took me over a year to get them cited, and they finally got cited on his death.
And she ended up spending, I believe she had said $30,000 of her own money on attorney fees.
Absolutely. And if you don't have any money, it's over. You're dead. You can't do anything about it. And, you know, when I told you about when the LA Times did that big expose, well, Chief Justice George was his name at the time. He opened up, he put a committee together to kind of like, let's review these guardianships in the courts. Well, on the panel, they had 3 meetings, one in LA, one in Sacramento, one in San Francisco. Well, the panel were all judges. They were all probate judges. And I went, well, that to me was not a very fair hearing. And I went to the one here in Sacramento, and I brought clients, you know, that could get up and speak to the abuse in the courts on conservatorships. Nobody was allowed to speak.
Who made that decision?
The panel.
Okay.
Of probate judges.
Okay.
So that went nowhere. However, what did happen because of the result of that is that the fiduciary board got established here in California. It's called California Fiduciary Board, and it's under Consumer Affairs, because these private, I was seeing that the private conservators, well, they're not licensed, and what happens if you have a problem with them? Where do you go to report it? The courts are siding with them. You're certainly not going to go to court. So I helped establish the fiduciary board. And I hate to say it, but it's just not working. It's not properly funded. I just testified a couple months ago with Carrie Kasem, who was
Casey Kasem's husband,
Kasem's daughter,
the DJ.
Yes,
and we are seeing a lot of celebrities get thrown into conservatorships right now.
Glenn Campbell, Mickey Rooney. I worked on some of those cases, and now we've got Britney Spears. You know, that was
and then Wendy Williams.
Wendy Williams, and you know, she got into that, and so now it's really raised its head. But I still think that there's problems in the court, and these court investigators wield a lot of power, and they go in and they interview family members or whoever they have to interview to determine, well, who do we think is going to be the best guardian? Well, I'd rather my kids stole my money than some.
Well, and I'd rather spend my last days with my kids.
Exactly.
And my family and my friends that I choose to spend my time with.
Exactly. But once you're under these conservatorships, you have no rights to say anything. They totally control your life. Now, did you watch that?
Okay, so at what point in our Constitution does it say once you reach a particular age, you lose your constitutional rights? Where
it doesn't.
So everything that's happening here is a clear violation of people's constitutional rights.
Exactly.
Constitutional attorneys, you guys need to get involved in this.
Oh, yeah. Now, if some of these people, like some of the cases that I've really worked on, that there was a substantial amount of money. If those people did not have any money, bag lady in the street, I mean, all these homeless people, nobody's conserving them.
Right.
So.
Right. I mean, I just the other day, I was in Los Angeles, and there was a guy easily in his mid-80s just sleeping on the sidewalk. Nobody's helping him. No. What about our veterans that are out there on the sidewalk?
Exactly.
They don't have money, so the courts aren't interested in them. Is that what you're telling me?
Exactly. They're not interested in that because there's no money in it, really. I mean, I hate to say it, I really do, because I'm a flag waver, you know.
Right.
I'm a first generation American here, and we have a lot of rights here that you don't have in other countries. Right. But yet, when you get into this probate area, and the judges just rubber stamping things and believing everything that an investigator will say or a private fiduciary will say, well, we found this, Your Honor. I'm going, well, wait a minute, that's not the case at all. And they shut down the families a lot. They really do. They shut the families down. And usually the family that tries to fight it, well, they don't have money to hire lawyers.
Well, or what happened to Jonathan, who was on before? He ended up being fined by the judge just for asking questions.
Oh, they strong arm these people. I mean, this is America. And I've been very concerned about certain judges in this state. I'm just going to hone in on California. I've been very concerned about some judges and how they're evaluating cases and who they're assigning to be the guardian for these people. And here in Sacramento area, years ago, it started with 4 people, I think it was 4, might have been 5, people that work for the public guardian's office left employment and started their private fiduciary companies because they saw it coming and they saw the amount of money that could be made. And these are the culprits, one of them in particular that's on my website in that 5-part series.
And what about the state legislatures? Have you approached them? Are they willing to write laws to stop this? Or are they just so busy laundering their own money they don't care?
Yeah. Well, I did testify in front of the Judiciary Committee on Carrie Kasem's. And that
was that national or state?
No, just state. But she's going around. She's trying to go around to other states. But, you know, and it's about her dad. And usually that starts it all off. That's what happened to me. Start with my family member being a victim of a nursing home abuse. But I think it needs more meat and potatoes. And I think she got some legislation changed here in California. And she's trying to do that nationally that says if you have a conservatee, and you are the conservator, you cannot deny family members information. Where is that person? Because this is what they did in Carrie Kasem's case. They wouldn't tell her where her dad was. And his wife.
I keep hearing that again and again and again, that the families are not told where their family member went.
And that's what this law in California is going to change, is that private fiduciaries or fiduciaries, conservators, have to tell family members where they place the conservatee. I'm working on a case right now that this woman's been missing for a year. We can't find her. $47 million estate.
You can't find her?
Nope. Found her at one point in a nursing home, and people that worked for her, because she had a big she came from Germany. She and her husband worked really hard. They came here after the war, World War II, built a massive estate, mostly in property, apartment buildings, real estate buildings. And he died. She only had one daughter. The daughter died. No relatives here. And she worked hard and she amassed this huge estate. Well, she fell and broke her hip and ended up in a hospital in Northern California. And somebody in that hospital had a contact to the guardian's office. Called, said, oh, Mrs. So-and-so is here with a broken hip. Public guardian swooped in, took control of her, moved her, and wouldn't tell anybody. They took her phone away from her. She had nothing. Found her. It took a couple months. They found her in a facility, went into the facility. These people worked for her. They were her employees for her real estate company, and she owned a restaurant. I mean, she was very wealthy. She is very wealthy.
$47 million is a big chunk of change.
You better believe it. So they find her and they go into the facility and she starts crying, get me out of here. They've taken everything away from me. All I have on is a gown and a pair of socks. I have no purse, no phone, no nothing. So they said, well, we're going to work on this and we'll come back tomorrow. They went back the next day, gone. Nobody's seen her since.
See, this is crazy. I really hope that you can contact, luckily, I don't know if you know who Assemblyman Bill Saley is. He just left the state assembly and was tapped as the U.S. attorney in Los Angeles. And he has vowed to get to the bottom of corruption. And I really, Bill Saley, and he is now the U.S. attorney in Los Angeles. And that man is a good man. So
Billy?
Bill,
Yeah.
William Asayli, Essaayli, Asayli.
Can I use you as a reference?
100%.
Can I say you referred?
100%.
Okay.
So listen, I appreciate everything that you're doing. I don't think a lot of people have the guts. I've met some women, Trish Cagney, for instance, working hard on this. When I spoke to you, I thought that you would be a great fit for this episode just from the flyover view of what's happening. We need to take care of our elderly.
Right. And, I'm not talking about my case.
No, you're talking about multiple cases.
There needs to be some attention to the Ventura County Probate Department.
And that is my county. That is my county.
Oh, that's right. You are in that area.
I am in Ventura County. We only have a few minutes left. If you want to dive into that for a couple minutes and then let everybody know where they can find you, where they can help your foundation, or a contact in case somebody's in trouble.
Sure.
First, Ventura. What's going on here?
Well, I've been working on the courts in Ventura now for several years, and I've amassed quite a few cases there, and it's all pertaining to, and I really, at this point, I want to mention names.
Yeah, don't. It's okay.
But I'm on it, and in one particular court. I'm the probate department, one particular judge in particular. So I'm on that, and I've been working with quite a few clients that all have the same thing going on, isolation of their family members, property taken from them. So it's pretty serious. It's very serious, and I'm working on that diligently. But again, you're fighting the court system, so it's very difficult. I'm not a lawyer, so I can't file, any types of actions. But if people want to contact me that have had experience with, conservatorship abuse by either private conservators or public, anybody who's hearing this, because we work all over the country. I don't just work in California. We have clients in every state. They can contact the Foundation Aiding the Elderly in Sacramento, California, 916-481-8558.
And what is the website?
Oh, numeric 4, then it's FATE, FATE.org, which is all of our fate to get old, right? Yeah. When I started this organization, I never even realized that I had that acronym until a friend of mine said, you know that Foundation Aiding the Elderly, the acronym's FATE. Went,
that's God.
It is. So
yeah, that's God. That's the way God works. Yep, he gave you that.
And I believe that. And I believe that my aunt died in that facility to get me involved in this work because I'm very tenacious. I'm very about accountability. I don't like it when people get away with abusing people, much less our elderly.
Right.
So I've been doing the work ever since. Over 9,500 families we've served in the United States.
Well, I want to thank you for the work that you're doing. And again, you guys, www.4fate.org. Visit that website and support their cause if you can. Again, if you guys need help, they're there for you as well. To the judiciary out there that is abusing their power, I have one message for you. Remember your oath. Remember your oath.
Exactly.
And as far as Bill Asayli, U.S. Attorney's Office, this is something you guys need to look into. I think that we've got enough people claiming injustice. It's worth a peek. So,
it is.
Yep. So, Carole, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate your time.
Well, please feel free to have me again because there's a lot more to say.
Yeah.
And if you want to do nursing home abuse, that's pretty
we'll
big
have
too.
you back. We'll definitely have you back. All right, everybody.
Thank you, Lori.
Thank you, Carole. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.
All right, everybody. That's our show for this week. Thank you for tuning in. It's so important that you guys share these videos and make sure to tune in next week. We'll have some more trouble for you. Bye-bye. If you enjoyed this video, remember to follow me on X at Lori Mills, the number 4CA42, Uncover Cali on Rumble, and Uncover California on YouTube.
California.